বৰঠাকুৰ IAS একাডেমি প্ৰস্তুতি আৰু অধ্যয়নৰ নিৰ্ভৰযোগ্য ঠিকনা।
Hello everyone, welcome to the Hindu analysis for 1st June 2021. Let us begin with the first article today. GDP shrinks by 7.3%, Q4 uptick moderates 2021 carnage. Now, with the second wave waning, now we are refocusing our efforts and our concentration on recovery of our economy. What are the factors that we look when we want to understand how the economy is doing? One is the GDP, that is India's gross domestic product. The second is GAV, gross value added. So in case of both, the national income or provisional national income estimates released by the National Statistical Office shows that we are seeing a marginal contraction of 8% that we projected earlier. Now our GDP shrank by 7.3%. Now when the first wave of pandemic hit, that is in the year 2019 and 2020, our GDP growth rate was hovering anywhere between 3 to 4%. Not only did we see our GDP shrink by a percentage of 7.3%, we are also seeing our economy, in our economy particularly, the gross value added shrinking by a percentage of 6.2. So again, we have to compare. This is the second wave we are seeing. This is the second set of lockdowns that the governments, various state governments and the central government not so, but various state governments are implementing. So when the central government implemented the lockdown in the first phase of coronavirus in the year 2019 and 2020, our GVA shrank by 4.1%. So compared to that, the effect on GVA, particularly in this during this set of lockdowns or series of lockdowns, is little bit minimal, in the sense that we are seeing a difference of around 2% in shrinkage. So what is the bottom of all this? It means that our GDP is shrinking. We are experiencing a severe contraction in our economy, despite various economic packages that were announced by central government. It seems like the fiscal packages that the central government has suggested and trying to implement and has come out with various incentives in terms of PLI schemes and etc. and so forth, seems to have a minimal effect on our economy. Because at the end of the day, whatever the economy, Indian economy does depend on multiple other factors, and it seems that whatever the economic package that the government of India has announced is limited to that effect, that it has been directed towards only few key industries that the government of India thinks as critical part of our economy. But when you have a pragmatic look of our Indian economy, those industries which the government is concentrating, though they form an integral part of our economy and economic growth, they are not the end all of our economy. There are other services, there are other industries that are much more important, and these sectors that the government of India is not concentrating on tend to have an impact on how our economy functions. So it seems that the economic policy or the fiscal policy that the government of India has adopted right now may not be able to answer all our needs or all our questions in terms of economic recovery or economic growth, but we are on the right track of economic recovery. That can be said with some sort of certainty, right? Because we are seeing high percentage of FDIs, we are seeing opening up of manufacturing sectors, we are seeing investments into manufacturing sectors, we are seeing some good response to PLI scheme that the government of India introduced. And in the later article, we'll be discussing about the indigenization of Indian military sector, also private sector, in the sense that And according to our Chief Economic Advisor of the Finance Ministry, K.V. Subramaniam, He doesn't expect the GDP forecast to be significantly affected. According to him, whether growth will be in double digits or single digits, there is uncertainty. Some of the scientists are talking about the possibility of a third wave too. It would be speculative to tell you exact numbers. So from what we are hearing from various corners of the scientific society, particularly in the case of virology and allied scientific community, they are of the certain opinion that until and unless the vaccination pace picks up in India, we are staring at a third wave by the end of September, if things are really bad, in the mid of September. So whatever the economic policy that the government of India is thinking about, or whatever the economic factors or economic planning that is going into industry, the respective companies or industries doing, they are bracing for the shock that they are expecting, or they are going to expect. They are planning for a third wave. It seems like everybody is planning for a third wave. Whether it is true or not, it is entirely speculative, as the economic advisor is saying. You cannot go for exact numbers. That is why I am not concentrating on the percentages of the shrinkage or nothing like that. So the end-all solution to all these things seems to be two factors. One is how far the government of India is willing to get into kickstarting the economy again through wave or spate of investments into private sector, or schemes, bringing out new schemes that are financially, fiscally very incentivized, in a sense that industry is going to spend more, so that they get an encouragement from the central government and the state governments in both terms. And also how the government of India is and the state governments are going to handle this vaccination drive. Till now, only 3% of our population, conservatively estimated 3.5%, but let us be clear about it, 3 to 3.5% of the population is vaccinated. The government of India has set a goal that they are going to vaccinate at least 80% of the population by the end of the year. But as yesterday we discussed, whatever the manufacturing numbers, they don't add up to the fact that we can vaccinate 80% of the population. At bare minimum best, if the current pace continues, will be anywhere between 20 to 30%. That's it, not more than that. So now it is time for the government of India to again revise or rethink their economic policy and their vaccination policy, because at the end of the day, our vaccination policy and our vaccination success does dictate how well we are going to do with our economy. Moving to the next article, SC bats for one price for vaccines across nation. Again, the court raises doubts on Central's deadline for total coverage. That is absolutely true. As I said earlier, only about 3.12% of Indian population had received both doses of COVID-19. Now we are at a stage where we are happy that at least certain percent of the population has got at least one dose of COVID-19 vaccine. So we are no longer so stuck upon the idea that both doses of the vaccine should be administered. We are just happy that at least one dose of the vaccine is administered to citizens. The factors, again, there are multiple factors that go into this situation that we are right now, but we are not going to discuss those things because we have already dealt with in earlier classes. Now, the Supreme Court suggesting or asking for the central government to consider the fact that why not go for one price for vaccines across the nation. Again, it boils down to the policy. Yesterday we were discussing about a letter written by the Empowered Committee for Vaccine Program, the chairman releasing a press statement stating that when the central government was considering a centralized policy for vaccination with one rate and free vaccination for the people who cannot afford them or marginalized communities or the sections of the society, state governments were pushing for a decentralized vaccination policy. When the central government agreed to that and gave the decentralized authority to state governments to procure vaccines and administer their own vaccines and adopt their own policy in vaccination, they didn't succeed because consider that not only India, every other nation in the world wants access to vaccines. So when states go about and ask for bids to be submitted by vaccine manufacturers at lower prices, at the end of the day, they are a private company and they are going to go for a profitable model, not for what our model is asking for. That is, we are going to buy high number of doses, give to us at cheap rates. So they are not going to come here. They are going to go to some other Scandinavian country or other country where they are willing to pay a premium on vaccines. So during the court hearings, the court observed that the central government merely suggested that the central government must consider a vaccine plan where the price is uniform for the entire country. So again, the rationale for dual policy pricing again comes down to what the central government is procuring. So at the end of the day, both the companies and the government has given multiple sets of clarification as to why the companies are selling the vaccines at one price to the central government and a different price to state governments. So it has to do with how the government has given advances to these vaccine manufacturers so that they are incentivized to produce more vaccines. So again, those things do come into play because no state government has came forward and said that we are going to give you an advance for your lot or for your vaccines in advance so that you can use that money as an investment and improve your manufacturing capacities. As far as now, India doesn't have a uniform price for vaccines. Will that be different? Only time can tell, which we don't have right now. Moving on to the next article, it is time to define limits of sedition. Now, as far as why this is being discussed, this is pertaining to Andhra Pradesh government invoking sedition charges on an MP and against two news channels for reporting critically on Andhra Pradesh government's handling of COVID-19 pandemic in the state. And the government of Andhra Pradesh had hinted at the idea, or at least moved towards in the direction of invoking sedition charges on the news channels, particularly in this case TV5 and ABN, which are regional channels. And they have approached the court for relief. This is particularly interesting because the 3-judge bench led by Chandrachud and other juries, it's interesting that they are in the opinion that there is a point of view from the judiciary itself internally that there is a need for the rethink of what sedition is and the ambit and the parameters for provisions of sections 124A and 153A and 505 of the Indian Penal Code. Now, as you know, various state governments, including in certain cases the central government, has invoked sedition charges on various individuals. They may be social activists, they may be individual citizens, they may be journalists or whatever, where they were being slapped with sedition charges for stating their opinion. That has been the consistent observations from both the judiciary and from the civil society alike. Now, at this point of time, when sedition charge has been invoked and used indiscriminately by both central governments and the state governments, the court, at least a certain part of the Supreme judiciary, thinks that it is high time for us to define the limits of sedition, because it is time for us to prevent the indiscriminate use of sedition charges. So, when you consider this is coming from the highest court of India, you can imagine that there is going to be a future petition or bills or certain number of bills that are going to be filed in front of Supreme Court of India on this matter, and we are going to have a landmark decision on what is the limit that the Supreme Court of India is going to set on the invocation of sedition charges. Again, the court is saying that we have to rethink and rejig the ambit and parameters of the provisions under sections 124A, which is sedition, 153A and 505 of Indian Penal Code. So moving on, power play to bring the digital ecosystem to heel. So to revise what has been going on with the information technology, that is intermediary guidelines and digital media ethics code rules of 2021, the one particular rule that has been the problematic for most of the companies and part of civil society activists, as you call them, is Rule 4.2. So what is Rule 4.2? Rule 4.2 imposes an obligation on significant social media intermediaries providing a messaging function to ensure traceability of the originator of information on their platforms. Now, the central government, when WhatsApp filed a petition in front of the High Court of Delhi, in its reply to WhatsApp, the government said two things. One, right to privacy is not absolute, which is absolutely true, because the Supreme Court of India in K.S. Puttaswamy case has clarified that any restriction on this right must be necessary, proportionate, and include safeguards against abuse, but they said that it is not absolute. Now, that is one stance of the government, that no right is absolute, and the Supreme Court cases have backed that opinion. So it is absolutely right that the government of India thinking no right is absolute is true, because you have Supreme Court decisions and landmark cases that have been fought over this issue where the Supreme Court said the same thing, no right is absolute. Now, the second point that the government of India raised is, as far as the asking for the information regarding the originator of a message, the government of India said that we have other means and ways through which we can obtain the same information, but in certain cases, in order to save time and ensure the investigation process is done in a sped up way, we need to have that information directly from you. That has been the stance of government. Even the Supreme Court, I told you, right? Even the Supreme Court said that don't bring these guidelines as mere guidelines, bring them as rules or act so that the companies can fall in line. Because even the Supreme Court observed that these companies are operating on a very thin line of legislation which doesn't define anything in a broad manner. There is no set thing. So the WhatsApp stands that the privacy of an individual is at risk. Yes, it is at risk. Now, does the question rise, the WhatsApp argument that right to privacy is a fundamental right under the Constitution? Yes, right to privacy is a fundamental right under the Constitution, but the government stance and the Supreme Court stance is very clear. It is not an absolute right. There are certain safeguards that have been put into it, because there are certain restrictions that have to be imposed on fundamental rights for the common good. That has been the observation of Supreme Court itself, which has set the basic structure of Constitution in place in the first place. Now, what is the law? When you look at it in a cool and calm-headed way, one of the major problems that we lack right now is two things. One, we don't have proper privacy protection, data protection laws. Until and unless we have a clear-cut privacy protection and data protection laws in India, the government of India cannot do much in terms of securing Indian citizens' information. Look at the case of European Union. They had brought in the GDPR laws. The moment the laws were put into place, all the social media platforms, including Google, were found to be violating majority of the laws that were placed into that guidelines. What the European Union did, they do what they do best. They sued left, right, center of each and every intermediary company, and they brought them to their knees, and they forced these companies to pay millions of dollars as fines. Now look what WhatsApp is doing in European Union. They are saying we are going to bring the privacy policy, but it is up to the user to either accept the privacy policy or not accept, meaning to opt out of the privacy policy. If and only if India had certain guidelines or laws in place in terms of protecting Indian citizens' privacy and right to data protection, I think it would, in this similar case where WhatsApp would have said we are bringing the new privacy law, it is up to the user to bring either to agree for the new privacy law or opt out of privacy law. So since we don't have that, we have to again go to courts to settle this issue. What is the major point of contention? When you look at it in a cool-headed way, the first thing that you observe when you go through all the guidelines is the guidelines lack an effective safeguard in that they fail to provide a system of independent oversight over tracing requests made by the executive. Now, this definitely means some executive officer is going to sit in some place and is going to request or at least initiate a request for somebody's personal user database from WhatsApp without any oversight whatsoever. Until and unless such thing is placed, when you are framing rules, you have to ensure that certain safeguards are put in place, which these rules lack right now. So one of the ways for the government to take forward this argument is come out with an amendment or an addition to this, whatever the rules that they have proposed, clearly adding safeguards to this request, because there has to be some sort of oversight when private information of an individual citizen is being requisitioned. So that has been the major pushback for it. Even the argument of WhatsApp comes out of this, that there is no proper insight or oversight as to who is asking for whose information and what is the need for such information to be asked in the first place by that executive directly. So scrutiny is a must. As I said earlier, other means do exist for traceability, but this traceability feature that the government of India is essentially, in layman's terms, it's a backdoor that they are asking for, but the access to this backdoor is not in the hands of the government but in the hands of the company. All the government does is from time to time comes and requests the backdoor to be opened and ask for the particular originator of the message, and they move back when they get their information. So that is the major problem. One, you are asking for something which is private in nature. The second thing is there are other means to get it. Third, that important one, when you consider about framing some rules and you are giving an authority to a person in government, what is the oversight over it? What is the scrutiny that is being done when such requisitions are being made by the officers? So that this is where the situation lies now. First, we don't have proper laws to protect data privacy and data protection in India. Second, when such information is being requisitioned by the officers of the government, there is no proper oversight over how the information is being used after they have received it. Until and unless these safeguards are put in, the question is always going to be an issue of trust, which when you consider previous various governments' actions all over the world, when it comes to individuals' privacy, countries do play fast and loose with that concept. Example, America, they have got virtual access, NSA got virtual access to everybody's email, and look how that turned out. So scrutiny is very important aspect of law when individual privacy is involved. So moving on, CoWIN, casinos and luck. So this entire article is a play on words in sense that the portal that we are using right now is inadequate, outlandish in sense that can be said. That is what the author opinions here, because how bad the design is. You have to agree that the CoWIN platform, though is an innovative one, does not answer or does not cater to the needs of the citizens at a time of crisis. The platform should have been a very easy to use, simple to use, easy to access, easy to understand, easy to process. What CoWIN is not. CoWIN is complicated, CoWIN is hard to use, CoWIN is hard to access in the first place. So the procedure for a citizen to get vaccinated is to register on the COVID platform or Aarogya Setu app. Try to schedule an appointment at the preferred centers. Though it sounds easy, it is hard. Even digitally literate people are having troubles securing a spot or an appointment through CoWIN platform. They had to rely on third-party apps who were gaming the system like they did in IRCTC scam to get spots in CoWIN platform, which the government of India realized early on and has brought the hammer down and ensured that these apps don't operate. But let me tell you, certain services do still exist where they ensure that you get an appointment through CoWIN platform. Now, it's not about the casino instance. He's just comparing it to the luck factor or the casino gambling factor. But at the end of the day, the bottom line is the CoWIN platform is not uniform and user friendly. During these times of crisis, whatever the suggestions or the interaction that the government wants to have with its citizens through an app or a website or any form of software, that software has to be very user friendly, very easy to use and very simple to operate, which CoWIN is not. So it is high time for the government of India to rework the entire CoWIN platform and take away all the complexities that are bogging down citizens into getting an appointment for vaccination. Moving on, Central Vista project essential for public importance, Delhi High Court. Delhi High Court has been at a point of time has been inundated with petitions against, bills against Central Vista project. During the hearing of one such petition in front of the Delhi High Court, the bench of Chief Justice of Delhi High Court observed that they are not going to stay the construction of Central Vista project, and the petitioners were arguing that the labor will be at risk during the pandemic when they are taking part in the construction activities, and they have filed that the construction process must immediately stop in order to protect the lives of the workforce there. So the court observed that we are of the view that this is a motivated petition preferred by the petitioners and not a genuine public interest litigation. The court said this while imposing a cost of 1 lakh on petitioners for wasting the time of the court. Now the court has clearly said that whatever the Central Vista project is going on, it is an essential project, it is an essential activity. There is no proof indicates otherwise. It means that the construction project will go on, or at least this petition is struck down. You know, there has been a lot of pushback from various quarters of the society, including the opposition party, on the need for the construction of Central Vista project during this COVID-19 and spending 20,000 crores supposedly during the construction of this Central Vista project. Various central government ministers have come out and defended the project. You have even the civil society divided into two parts, the economists into two parts, where one is arguing against it and where the other is arguing for it. There are petitions in front of the Supreme Court of India dealing the same, in the Delhi High Court dealing the same. Until and unless the court intervenes or otherwise, the project is going to go on. We are going to concern ourselves only with the facts as to what was the need of the project, why the project is being constructed, and what is the objective of the Central Vista project. That's it. Moving on, decision soon on oxygen for industrial use of oxygen for industrial purposes. So during the peak of second wave, the government issued a GO banning or preventing oxygen for industrial use. Whatever the oxygen that was being produced for industrial use was diverted towards medical use to fight the second wave of COVID-19 pandemic. Now, the government, since we are seeing a decline in the second wave of pandemic, where we are seeing anywhere between 1.2 to 1.5 lakh cases, but remember the death rate is still high, but nonetheless we are seeing a decline in number of cases or number of positive cases in the second wave. So whatever the oxygen needs that we had during the peak of COVID-19 second wave, may no longer be needed. So now the companies have asked for the government's opinion to ask for the government to lift the ban on use of oxygen for industrial purposes. Now the government has come out and said that we have constituted an empower group which is consulting with medical professionals to assess the demand for medical oxygen for next wave. As I said earlier, the government is clearly planning, both state government, central government, including the industry itself, is planning for the third wave, which may or may not come. That is speculative, but nonetheless, preparation is always good. Now the government said that once we estimate the numbers in terms of the need of oxygen, if and when a third wave hits India, keeping that number in mind, we are going to lift at least certain restrictions or certain percentage of restriction on use of oxygen for industrial purposes. So one of the drawbacks of diverting oxygen away from industries is to the cessation of manufacturing industry, because majority of the industries do depend on oxygen for manufacturing. The government is right now considering when they can lift certain restrictions so that liquid oxygen supply can resume to industry. Moving on, Twitter has to comply with IT rules, High Court. The court has issued notices to Union Government and the microblogging site Twitter, which the Delhi High Court has clearly said that Twitter has to comply with the new IT laws that were being brought in. In other news pertaining to the same thing, an advocate had filed a petition in front of the High Court Delhi asking for the appointment of a resident grievance officer under the Rule 4 of Information Technology Guidelines. Now, regarding that, Justice Rekha has issued notice to the central government and the Twitter, but the problem lies with the petitioner couldn't find contact details of the resident grievance officer on the website of Twitter. This is a separate petition on top of which the court observed that Twitter has to comply with the new rules brought in by the central government. The Defense Ministry on Monday notified the second negative import list, which now renamed as the Positive Indigenization List, where 108 items that can now be only purchased from domestic sources. Now, with the addition of 108 items into this negative import list or the positive indigenization list, the number has grew to 209 items that the armed forces can only source it from domestic sources. They no longer can import such items from outside companies. They have to purchase them only from domestic sources. This will certainly boost our domestic military manufacturing sector. But the problem lies with one thing, the idea of indigenization, because till recently our domestic defense sector has been crippled because there was a clear lack of investment or support from our government and our armed forces. Now, with the addition of the negative import list, though this is going to act as a boost to our defense manufacturing sector, but remember, our defense manufacturing sector was neglected for a long period of time. Though this acts as a boost, this does put some stress on armed forces, because since they no longer cannot import 208 items, which out of them some are very critical like ammunition and etc., our domestic defense sector will take certain time to catch up, and given the current situation that we are facing on the border areas, the time that our armed forces doesn't have. So there are some leeway given in this negative import list, where if the item is of critical importance and critical need in a warlike situation, the armed forces can negate the negative import list and go out and import those ammunitions and critical needs that they have to fill critical gaps in times of warlike situations. But nonetheless, the bottom line here is, first, we were very our domestic defense sector was neglected for a certain period of time. Though this negative import list and certain investments from armed forces or the Ministry of Defense do add or help in the boosting of our manufacturing sector, defense manufacturing sector, but that is not going to happen rapidly. It will take some time for our manufacturing sector to grow to a certain level that they meet the demands of our armed forces. But nonetheless, this is a right step in the positive direction. Moving on to the next article. In a bid that is going to complicate already complicated relations between Germany and European countries and America, is this news that US has spied on Merkel European allies with the help of the Danish, according to a media source. So this article is entirely speculative. Let me be very clear about that. There isn't enough data that supports the claim that is being made here. But nonetheless, when US is being accused of spying on heads of states with a third country's help, it does make a lot of sense, because that is what they have done in the past. Now, what is this? Now, according to the new accusation made by a media outlet, the NSA has eavesdropped on internet cables from 2012 to 2014. So this happened in the past, not now. But we don't know what is happening now also. But this is particularly in regards to a time period between 2012 and 2014, where the US has spied on top politicians in Europe, including German Chancellor Angela Merkel, with the help of Danish intelligence and Danish government in sense. Because Danish intelligence is helping means the government of Danish government was also involved in the activity. Now, this kinds of put US in a tight spot, because for the past few years there has been a critical gap between European allies and US relations, with the inclusion of China in European affairs. Recently, they had an agreement with China for investment plan, which was duly nixed by certain countries when they went for ratification of that same proposal in the European Union. That proposal didn't garner enough votes, so that plan was put on hold, which came as a relief to the United States. But during the Trump presidency, the relationship between the European Union and US had definitely strained, because Mr. Trump was very blunt in saying that they are not putting up money into the NATO forces, and they were becoming lazy by using US forces as their own national army. So this has put a lot of strain into these relationships, which the Biden administration is though trying. But the influence of China in various companies in European Union is making it a lot difficult. And with these new accusations that are coming to surface, these things are going to put a lot of stress on US-European relations. Moving on, as births decline, China to allow couples to have third child. Now, this is well-known fact that China is going through a population crisis. So, the Chinese population is 1.41 billion according to 2020 census, an increase in 72 million since the last census were conducted in 2010. Now, though it is reflective of a growth of around 5.38%, that doesn't bode well for China, because their active population or the young population is very low. Keeping that in mind, in the first few years back, they had done away with one-child policy and they had brought in the two-child policy. And now when the interim data is being considered by the Chinese statisticians in between, they found that even with the two-child policy in place, they are not going to meet their goals. With that, the government had came out with an amendment stating that they are going to allow a third child or couples to have a third child because they didn't see the boost in birth rates that we're expecting with the two-child policy. So China is going to have a lot of problem with their young population because they don't have young population because of excessive and aggressive control of form of population control. This is the fallout of that. So moving on, Singapore to vaccinate school children soon, in a move that is going to boost in a positive trend towards the vaccination of children under 18 years of age. The Singapore government has announced that they are going to vaccinate school children in a phased manner. And the vaccine that they have chosen to do this so is Pfizer vaccine. They chose Pfizer vaccine because Pfizer has been approved for clinical trials under children for children under 18 years of age, and they have seen good response in their field clinical trials. So that is what the Singaporean government is going to do. We have to wait and see how the government of India is going to adopt when it comes to vaccination for children under 18 years of age. Moving on, vaccination key to health of economy. So this has been a pretty much economic theme for the last 2 years, or at least 1.5 years, because initially we realized that the only way to come out of this pandemic is vaccination. Even our chief economic advisor is saying the same, stating that vaccination is important for the health of the people and as well as the health of the economy, because the economic impact is extremely linked to the overall pandemic itself. So our economy is hurt because of pandemic. The only way to come out of this is to secure the health of the population so that they can get back to work and our economy can restart. The understandable statement here is immense uncertainty involved in various factors that we are seeing out of the pandemic. Nobody is able to predict or project a trajectory that this pandemic is going to take in the next few months, because there is a lot of uncertainty that surrounds this virus itself. When this much uncertainty is in the air, the certain fact that everybody agrees and understands is vaccination. So we have to forego whatever the uncertainty that surrounds this virus and go for the very certain fact that vaccination helps in economy. One of the major impacts that the economy had seen was due to the imposition of strict restrictions on movement and movement of people. The moment we restricted movement of people, our economy had tumbled to an extent that we are seeing high percentage of contractions than we have ever seen in our past. So vaccination, as I said, as the headline says, vaccination key to health of economy. And the economic impact due to lockdowns across states, though are not as bad as they were in the last year, that was those of the likes of the first lockdown that was imposed by the central government. But at the end of the day, they do still have an observable impact on our economy. Thank you. Stay safe. Namaste.
বৰঠাকুৰ IAS একাডেমি, প্ৰস্তুতি আৰু অধ্যয়নৰ নিৰ্ভৰযোগ্য ঠিকনা। বৰঠাকুৰ IAS একাডেমি।